I think we've all come across this, and honestly, we see it way more in remote meetings where a woman may be speaking and a man's voice becomes the loudest in the room and becomes the voice where everyone turns around and listens to. Now, in most organizations, what would happen is usually nothing. Honestly, nothing would happen because it is usually someone that's in a management position, and usually a man.
It immediately makes me reflect and think, God, have I ever been that voice? I'm just like, God,
Yeah.
it's quite a humbling
It's
description.
very hard to do, and because fortunately for both me and you, the majority of the time people are doing this, they look like us.
Chris, we did it. We're here. It's so good to see you. It has been a long time, hasn't it? I'm going to get into that, but I want to just, for people that don't know you, I wrote a little thing. It feels like I need to do that because just so that people understand that when you're talking, they understand like from what experience you might be drawing on.
Mhm.
So I wrote down here that you started out in design, you moved from graphic to UX roles and into product design leadership. And then you shifted from consulting, working on strategy and agile delivery for lots of big brands. And then over time, you started to specialize in product ops. And I'm really going to have to talk to you about what that means. Holding senior roles at places like Farfetch and Bumble, and then you sort of focusing on like scaling sort of big high performance teams. Is that the sort of obituary of your career so far?
Yeah, I would say so. I was actually chatting on a podcast yesterday about this as well. Like, I remember my first graphic design role, and I always was more engaged with, and I guess I got a thrill from the operational side of even that role, rather than the work that I was doing. Is like, how can we automate things? How can I enable other people to do even better work? So I remember, it was 20 years ago now that I
Mm.
started to do that kind of thing, and I feel like I'm doing similar work now, but just at a much higher level and a much broader scale.
Why does that interest you? Like, what is it that you just thought like I like that aspect of it? Because there's so many sides to design. Like you could have been really into colors and fonts and logos, but you've drawn to that side of it. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be like that. That used to be my thing. I mean, I came out of university not really knowing what direction to go in, and landed a graphic design job, and really enjoyed the more visual aspect of graphic design.
Yeah.
I wasn't working at the hip new agency based central London. I worked at a women's fashion store that I don't think is around anymore, and I worked for a big paint company. I wasn't doing like the real high end creative work. I tried to make it as creative as possible, but
Yeah.
I suppose I realized over time that I moved from graphic design into UX design because I wasn't able to push as many boundaries as I wanted to in graphic design, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, so
Yeah.
how might I design websites?" That's all I wanted to do, and I ended up doing UX design, which I didn't know what it was at the time.
Yeah.
I had no idea, just landed a role. But even then, I really enjoyed the how do we make things rather than the things that we were making and the things that we're putting out into the world. Of course I understood we were trying to build things really well for customers that they enjoyed using, that maybe they were paid to use, but it was on the internal side that just enjoyed more. And I realized over time that, particularly when I joined Sky and I was hiring designers, I realized that there was better designers out there than I was, and I
Yeah.
started to lose that craft. Then I stopped using the tools. I stopped caring too much about, font choice and color theory. I just stopped being interested in it, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can really resonate with that feeling of like I'm good, but I'm not the best.
Yeah.
There are people that are better than me,
And,
and
and enjoy it more than me, right? You could
yeah,
see that they enjoyed doing that, and I was like, okay, as long as you're happy and you feel like you can grow your career in this direction, I'm happy to support that.
yeah. I think that's a really. I think when anyone entering design, like it, I think naturally, people might start with the graphics, with the photo. Back in the day, Photoshop,
Right.
Flash, whatever it was, and then I think especially in these times at the moment with there've been so many different roles. It used to just be that you were a designer or
Mm.
a web designer or something like that, and now there's so many different things. I guess I guess that must be happening for a lot of people, where they come in from a graphic perspective, but then soon start to sort of, okay, where in this landscape am I going to be for a bit, and
Yeah.
then presumably that shifts as it did for you over time. I
It,
think,
it certainly did. And I mean, look, we met. I was thinking about this the other day. I think it was 10 years ago
yeah,
in Edinburgh, wasn't it? Like
10 years ago, yeah.
conference. And my conference talk at the time was UX design is dead, which was of course very antagonizing and facetious to a design crowd. And if you remember, it was in that church in Edinburgh, and I
I
forget the
do.
name of it now. And I had to stand at the pulpit because my mic had blown. I had to stand almost preaching to a design crowd, looking down from the rafters that their profession was dying, which of course is a bit silly. It was evolving for sure, but I still stand by some of the things that I said back then.
We were so nervous.
Yeah,
I can remember that,
yeah,
because that, I think, I don't know about you, but that was like the first big talk I'd done. That certainly to a crowd that big. Like I'd just done little stuff to teams and things, and that was, yeah, it was in a big church. I remember sitting next to you, and you went up quite early. I was right at the bloody end,
yeah,
which was just horrible. And I remember just like wringing my hands
yeah.
and just feeling so anxious. And just sort of like going through all the points in my head, and then saying to myself, "Don't talk too fast. Don't talk too fast."
Yeah.
I'm just interested in that emotional side of it, and I really want to get to the subject as
Yeah.
well. But that emotional side, like, how did you? That's a big talk. Like, did some of that
Mm.
resonate for you? That kind of ride?
It certainly did. I mean, I've been speaking for about 2 years up until that point, I think. And I think my biggest at the time was probably like 100 people. So it's like that's almost like a large meetup, or medium-sized meetup, I suppose. So jumping up to like, what was that, like 500-600 people, I seem to
Yeah,
remember. It was like a lot of
yeah,
people. And I because I was up relatively early, that was good for me. I have a lot of energy in the morning, so I'm very pleased you booked this at 9 o'clock. That's great for me.
yeah.
Um, so I had a lot of energy. I was raring to go. I'd had enough coffee and no food, and that I realized that's how I now prepare for speaking events. Um, and I walked up, and they mic'd me all up. I had the what they call it, Britney mic, don't they? I think. And I walked up, and I think the first few words I said the mic popped because the previous speaker had left theirs on, and immediately it completely threw me off. The whole
I
crowd
think
had
I
to
can remember that.
watch while the mic was taken off, and we had to discuss, right, do you want a handheld mic, or do you want to stand at the pulpit? And no one could find a handheld mic. So I was like, now I'm stood at this pulpit, and I'm a very, I guess, energetic speaker. I want to move around. I want to
Yeah,
try and engage with the crowd in some way. And all of a
yeah,
sudden, I was giving like this presidential speech,
yeah.
and that,
The lectern.
I suppose my nerves came back quite a lot then, because I wasn't natural anymore. Couldn't, have a conversation with the crowd and get my points across as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. I can really resonate with that. Like, I feel like doing talks. Like, I like to make it like conversational,
Mm,
rather, and I like to not have a script, and to just know it enough that it
yeah,
feels like
yeah,
people are hearing me in a thought process rather than regurgitating something. Because I always kind of think, well, you could just watch a YouTube video then, you
yeah,
know. But there's
yeah.
something, I feel like it's more engaging when I hear somebody sort of drumming up the words in real time.
Mm,
Like, that feels more compelling to me, and I can connect with some of that.
I
And
agree.
I feel like that's, yeah, being kind of like locked into that lecture, and the talk itself. Like, I think it's worth saying, like, when you came up with that UX is dead, like, that was a fairly new thing. Like, it was going around a bit, but not a lot. And now I think you said, like, there's a bit of discomfort about that now. I
Mm,
think there's a cliche to it. UX is dead, and there's
mm,
these sort of tropes that go around social media a lot and stuff. But at the time, like, that was a fairly new thing. I mean, I was going up there saying, "Hey, isn't UX great?" And then you were going, "UX is dead." It was sort of a new emerging kind of conversation, I thought, at the time. Is UX dead now? Has it died?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? It was, it was intentionally antagonizing. I wanted to, I suppose, poke a little bit at people that believe that UX was going to save, the way that we built products. And look, I mean, I think I was like 4 or 5 years into a UX career at that point, so I certainly didn't know everything. But some of the points I was getting across there was, um, in agile software development, we are collaborating very closely with a cross-functional mix and making decisions together. That's like the ideal. And at the time, Spotify model was all the rage, where you had like UX designers based on every embedded in every squad. Debunked quite quickly, but the model still exists today. And my point was there that there's a collaboration around the decisions that we're making on what to build. You've also got, and that was really the starting point of like design systems, component libraries, that almost like a front end or full stack developing team are building. And actually, when I was working at Sky, which was probably just before this talk, so I had a lot of experience there that built into that talk. There was a team that were building components that a designer in a cross-functional product development team could just bring in, and there was very little UI thought required, because
Mm,
everything's now becoming standardized and a lot quicker to load, and that's all fantastic. But the standardization of experience was also happening at that point.
mm,
So you could just grab things very quickly. You could just we were rapidly prototyping back then. We're
mm,
just dragging things in at very high fidelity UI,
mm,
getting it from customers, deciding things and going. And I think my point there was that there's starting to be, and that wasn't a positive thing to me, by the way.
oh,
I
really?
saw these things as positive, but the rolling up of all of that together wasn't positive,
Mm,
because there's a degradation of experience thought. And
mm,
actually, and I kind of wish I'd spoken about this at that conference. I did an event a couple of like months before this, where I was saying, I wonder if product managers will evolve into like experience managers, or maybe that's what they should evolve into. And you would have a much more design thought to product management, which again, I think is something that we are quite missing right now. And regards to whether UX is dead, I think it's evolved. And I thought, to be honest, that was my point at the conference. I see so little really great user experience design being done at organizations now that are building products. And I think it's partly, down to some of the things that I said, and partly down to um, designers probably in like, when, I don't know, 2017, 18, picked up the term product design. And that actually started off more as, I suppose, product people thinking more about outcomes.
mm,
That was a really good starting point. And now we have ended up in this place where product designer is almost like uh, a full stack designer or something, where they're expected to do UI research, testing, user experience. You need to know how to use design systems, maybe a little bit of coding. And now, obviously, with the AI evolving incredibly rapidly, now you're expected to know AI and data and this and that, and know everything. So product designer is almost a catch-all term for just someone who can do all of those things, and that
yeah.
includes experience design. I think that's where we're seeing it disappearing.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this because it's been bugging me. It's really been bugging me. I feel like there's a sort of Jekyll and Hyde or Frankenstein view in the recruiting market right now
Mm,
around we don't like generalists. Generalists are bad. So if you've had a varied experience that might have been for 20 years or something like that, and you've taken a number of roles, that's sort of not really favored. What seems to be favored is they call it like I you know like product design and they're saying they want all those skills, but the thing that they'll totally lead in on is Figma, and they'll
mm,
totally lead in on UI. They call it like taste. That seems to be the
mm,
thing, the commodity that I'm seeing is kind of valued. It's like we need someone that can do all the things that you just outlined, but if you go in there on an interview and your CV and your portfolio isn't going hard on like design systems and UI and it looks really polished, you're immediately junked out. And it's
mm,
like really what it looks like to me is that they are looking for convergers. They're looking for people that can just deliver on a vision and can just
Yeah,
knock out designs. And so, like for me, that's sort of a bit like a UI designer, really.
yeah.
That like I'm thinking about, what about facilitating workshops? What about dealing with difficult stakeholders? What about resolving conflicts? What about sense making really complex systems and data? I can't understand how someone can accrue all of that and be really good in Figma and deep in
Mm.
Figma and be really good in the tech, side of it as well. Like do those people exist?
Well, I mean, I don't think they do. I think the part of the problem that you're identifying there is that organizations can now take their time to find someone that they deem 100% perfect in every single aspect.
Because there's so many people on the
'Cause
market
there's so
right
many
now.
people in the market. Yeah,
Yeah.
so if it's a fintech looking for a designer, they're less interested in how you can explore and understand customer problems if your background is, say, in warehouse management systems or in retail or other B2C products, because they can just wait for the 50 to 150, 250 fintech designers that have been there and done it, that can prove that when they join, they can just start. And I think this is another big issue because I'm seeing like less onboarding, less support and training for people when they
Yeah.
do join because they're 100% perfect. And they've
Yeah.
got a 6 week period of, well, if you can't get on board and understand what you're doing here, then there's going to be questions asked.
So it's hyper relevance
Mm.
over breadth of
Yeah.
experience. And
Yeah.
yeah, I totally resonate with that. I think it it kind of creates this risk of like I've been calling it on LinkedIn a little bit like a homogenous
Mm.
design team, where that it's just composed of people that have all had very similar experiences, and you haven't got anyone, who's had more breadth and who may not have the exact same experience in the last three roles, but they've had a varied experience, which means they can bring, I mean,
Hmm.
I feel like that's where you're going to get innovation, because you're
Hmm.
going to have different experiences and different minds contributing to something. Whereas if you just get a load of people that have all worked in the same companies and done the same things, we just kind of, it's like a race to yeah, homogeny.
Yeah. But I mean, what you've just described there is something that's very, very easy to manage. Like if I'm thinking about an organization and I might, maybe in this organization, we've started to reduce the number of design leaders in there anyway, because that's happening too. You hire in, 20, 30 designers that are all basically the same mold, and we can just move them around whenever we need to move them
I
around.
see. I see.
That's very easy to manage. Now, I remember having this conversation at Farfetch when I worked quite closely with the design director there, and we were trying to identify the different capabilities each of our designers had, so they can be called so they can be more fungible, meaning we can move them around
Yeah.
depending on the need. So if we've got like a principal UX designer who's really great at that, there's an area of that business, of that product that we're building, that's probably going to need more experienced design at a given time than other areas. And if we are able to move that person around, we know that we're going to be able to innovate and create great products. And the experience design can take some time, right? It's not a thing that you can just quickly mock something up and say, hey, let's build this. It does take time to understand the problems and design the experience and experiment, see what works. So we only needed a couple of those people at Farfetch to kind of move around. A larger part of them, of the design group, was probably product design, that can kind of do a bit of everything. And
Yeah.
I actually think when you're less experienced and you're learning your different capabilities and tools, having a bit of everything is great. So you want a big chunk of your team to be like that, and then have a few specialisms to move around. The moving around, depending on the need of the organization and the product at the time, does require effort. You have to have design managers in that are looking broadly across the organization and are able to and have a good enough relationship with the other functional leaders to say, actually, we think we need to like shift a little bit. We're going to take out a couple of product designers. I'm going to give you like a lead, principal UX designer to come and work on that thing. So it does take a lot more, I guess, overheads to kind of manage that as a system rather than just saying, we've got 20 designers, they're all the same. We'll only move them around if you really need it, or if there's some
Yeah.
relationship issue, or if someone's on parental leave or annual leave, then we'll move things around. This is
Yeah.
a lot easier.
That's interesting, like, because I remember, when I did some management of, so I would say it's a medium-sized team at John Lewis, like, when I did the hiring, I was working with another UX manager, and we would always be thinking about, like, "Oh, we've got so and so, and they're really good at that, so we need someone who is good at this." And, like, that was our thinking, was, like, so that we would have someone that could roughly fit into different types of project. That was like
Mhm.
a real thing. And there were some people in the team that had like UI backgrounds and dev backgrounds. And that was great because it just meant that, we could really put someone in there into a project that would sort of suit their skills, like that was definitely our thinking. I, I'm wondering, like, I mean, I mentioned earlier about this convergency thing. Like, do you think this whole like push for product designers and this like UI focus and stuff is actually really about the death of divergency? And that's in part because of AI. The cost of getting it wrong, it
Mm.
isn't as high because you can just build things much quicker, and there's a sort of a contraction on costs and budget and all this kind of thing. And it's like, we don't want to spend ages researching, which is partly why you see a lot of user researchers out of work at the moment. And it's like, let's just like build the thing and see what happens later. It's the move fast and break things. Do you think there's like less appetite for discovery and research at the moment, and that's maybe why product designers is seen as a sort of like primary focus for the market?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, look, I mean, I'm speaking here with quite a subjective viewpoint anyway, right? And broadly, it would be unfair for me to say the market's shifting in a certain way, that's for sure. But the some of the things I've been speaking about recently is with the advent of AI and look, the reality is honestly that when I speak to people about AI and they tell me what they're doing with it, they're doing very, very basic things.
Yeah.
They're
Like
not
the
like
butler
in
service. So it's just helping them, like a junior, go and analyze this bunch of notes for me and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
And
Yeah.
and honestly, that I think that the majority of people are kind of using generative AI in that way, right? Like, can you help me shape my ideas around something? And that's
Yeah.
great. There's obviously a lot of like prototyping. Someone showed me yesterday like a tool they built for measuring product managers' capability scoring, and it's something that's been around for a while, but they spun it up in like 2 days because they used Lovable and they just created a prototype, and it looked great. That was fantastic. Um, the question I still come back to is AI going to make us more efficient and effective? And is if yes, then like go ahead and use it. I think on the diversion point, I I'm seeing that like a lot of product managers are similar to the way that we described just before, how product design or product designers have to end up doing quite a lot of things. I'm now seeing that shifted slightly onto product managers, and now they have to do a really wide variety of things that maybe they didn't do in the past. And there was quite a LinkedIn conversation going. Let's just call it that, where I believe someone in a Google team, so not representative of the whole organization, but someone in a Google team was saying they're now using vibe coding as a replacement for writing PRDs, so
Yeah.
product requirement documents. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting because to me, the act of writing was a collaborative effort. The act of writing was not for documentation. It was to help shape our understanding of what it is we should be building and why we should be doing it. And what they're saying is that they're not going to do that anymore. They're just going to
Skipping
build
that.
a prototype,
Yeah.
showcase it to the engineers. They'll probably have a few questions about how things works, and they'll go ahead and build it and get things live. So that lead time from idea to launch of a thing is really, really getting a lot shorter.
Yeah.
And we probably all know the stories of, I think it was it Booking.com, who like ship, I don't know, like 100 experiments a day per team, something like that. And they're all small tweaks. Now we're probably going to be able to ship experiments in a couple of days that are actually full features.
Yeah.
And yeah, they might not work perfectly. As long as it's a learning experience, that's fantastic. But there's still a learning experience in that writing. I know I'm kind of going off the topic of divergence here, but more onto like how AI is going to speed things up, and it might be a bit like the conference talk I gave in 2016, when like actually we're going to see things evolving quite quickly because of essentially automation. We could just
Um,
ask it to create things for us, and I wonder if I don't know what I don't know what the future looks like on this. It'll either end up being that we end up with, again, like hyper specialisms where only designers that have a very specific type of skill set or experience are getting hired, but we also have, when you look at the mix of functions we have in a product organization, we're going to have very specific roles for very specific things. And I think that does a bit of a disservice to individuals, generally generalists. And again, going to your point about innovation, if we end up having like 10 to 15 very specific role types, we have a UX researcher doing long-term research, we have a UX researcher doing medium-term research, we have a usability researcher that's only doing usability testing all the time. You're going to lose that breadth of capability that I think builds a better group of people, better group of teams that can innovate more quickly. So I
mm,
don't know if divergence is going to be something that happens. I certainly see it in other roles, and particularly in product operations. I'm wondering if there's a divergence happening there as well. But that might just be based on like experience level. As you
there-
grow, you're going to get more capabilities. Are you going to are you going to specialize, or are you going to keep broad?
there's something that's happening at the same time as what you're describing, because I think you're describing, very you're connecting like how the market is shifting and how roles are changing and all that kind of thing. The thing that I'm just aware of, and you're talking about AI, and you mentioned there that, they used to work with, content designer or something to,
Mm.
and now they don't need to. And it's like, there are people in this.
Mhm.
Like we're talking of roles, and we're talking about, different processes, but these are all people in here, and these are people who may have like been working in their career, for a long time. They might have, a mortgage, they might have kids, they
Mhm.
might have a certain setup in their life, and suddenly their role is obsolete, or is suddenly getting like shifted. And we're in this age of, I mean, I think, you said you start with that UX is dead. I mean, what that is really saying is like we are entering a phase of uncertainty and mass change where we don't really know where we're going. And I something that I'm feeling a lot myself, and something that I think is evident in the comment, and I want to get to the comment that you put on LinkedIn recently.
Mm.
It there's a sort of like, I feel like, and maybe I'm like, a bit altruistic here, but there's like a lack of care happening, for humans and people. And maybe it's like, yeah, we're all in this like capitalist,
Yeah.
machine, and it's not about people. It's just about churning out outcomes and outputs, unless you're like in tech for good or something. It's all about that. And I feel like the commercial side hasn't really impacted me a lot in terms of how I'm treated
Yeah.
as a person in the market. But now I feel like it is. It's looking at me as a commodity and saying you're of less value because, it's like AI can do 20% of what you can do today. And I kind of feel like there's something uncomfortable about that for me, of of how we're being like brushed aside a little bit as in this sweeping change that's happening. Does that does that resonate for you?
It
Am I
does,
just going
but
off on one?
look, it does, but it's not surprising to me. I think
Yeah,
a lot of, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head by saying, look, we live in a capitalist culture that does not value us. It values the financial output that we can drive. That's the be
that's the
all and
bottom
end all of
line.
it. Yeah, and
Yeah,
and look, that's not a great place to be. It's the world that we live in, unfortunately. I think a lot of organizations that have tried to showcase, we have really strong values and principles, and we care about people, has really just been on the face of it. And it's the people in the organization that are saying those things but they also work in that capitalist machine, right? So you can say like these are the values and principles that we have, and we believe them and we stand by them, which is 100% true in every case that I've always found. If a company says these are our values, they tend to stick with them. At least the ones I've worked with. But I have been very selective in the past about do values align with mine, and they generally do. But the people are creating those values internally inside that machine, and as soon as that machine changes, the people that created those values will also be gone.
What are your values?
So I value really strong inclusive cultures. I value building products in the right ways. So it, as much as I mean, it's interesting because as an operational person, I want to go in and have operational challenges, but I want there to be a growth mindset and desire to build things in that right way, so that there's a continuous improvement mindset in there. I care. Inclusivity for me is like the main cultural value that I think organizations need to have, because being inclusive generally means you're more diverse, generally means you're more creative. And those are the things that I care about a lot. I actually have them on my website as well, and I probably have too many of them.
Do
um,
you is that because you see it as a sort of effective principle that results in a good outcome, or is there also a thread of it's just the right thing to do?
yeah, I mean,
Because
yeah,
it's good to include people because and this is the deeply human podcast, so if I'm dragging it into that space, that's intentional, and it's just sort of like, is there some space in this for sort of like, it's not always about necessarily a business outcome. It may have a business outcome, but it's just a good thing to do to include people. Is there a
um,
component in there for you?
yes, but I'd push it further than that. I
Mm,
think. I think, as I say, so my viewpoint, which has been taken from someone else who used to work with Dr. J at ThoughtWorks, inclusivity drives diversity, which drives creativity, which drives a better understanding of customers. I mean, generally, we're building products for a pretty diverse set of people, usually, unless you run a very specific, like I have one of my coachees is working at a Muslim dating app. Okay, so there is a specificity there to the type of customer, but even then, there's a huge amount of diversity in
mm,
each of these groups, these
mm,
religious
mm.
groups as well, right? So yes, I think we're going to build more innovative products, which will drive more business, impact, business outcomes. If we just go down the capitalist route, yes, we can make money out of being inclusive. Okay, tick the box. I think on the other side, another kind of mantra that I hold from my time at ThoughtWorks is you should be able to bring your whole self to work without fear of reprisal, and
Mm.
that's the element of yes, it's a good thing to do. What did they say? Like hell is paved with the people's good intentions. Yes, that's a nice intention to have. I think we're seeing maybe even more, and so now the geopolitical landscape is an absolute nightmare here in other countries as well, and I think we have to show a lot more care through action. I don't think we can sit back and go, you know what, I have a value of being inclusive, and isn't that nice? I'm so happy. Because I think you end up in a position of almost apathy where you see these things happening around you, and you sit back and go, you know what, I'm not going to do too much about that. I care
Mm.
about it, but it's out of my control. So I think building inclusive teams is one of those actions that you can really take.
That word care stands out for me because I just wanted, there's a post that you shared that really drew my attention, and I might just read a little bit of it. You
Mm.
said, there's a quiet unraveling happening in tech hiring. While many are focused on the headlines of mass layoffs, a tough economy, and the rise of AI, what concerns me more is how these pressures are reshaping the hiring landscape. There's a visible shift towards valuing ultra narrow specialism and domain knowledge over broader, more adaptable experience. I agree with that. Um, it's as if depth now overshadows adaptability, even though the industry has always been defined by its need for people who can learn, pivot, and connect dots. And I thought this was interesting. While candidates are being pressured to refine their CVs for every role, to create bespoke cover letters, portfolios, and narratives just to be noticed, I rarely see companies putting in the same effort to be compelling. And then you said something like, you know, where is the evidence of care from
Mm.
companies? Where is the investment in inclusive hiring, meaningful culture, or safe, supportive workplace?
Hmm.
Where is it? What
Yeah, look, I'll touch on, you've touched on the specialism point already, right? And I think that's important. But there's a next part of that, which is there is so much pressure on candidates and design candidates in particular to create a world, a narrative that really very, very quickly explains who they are as a designer. And there was a post by, I didn't know this person, but they've got a number of followers. I mean, in the tens of thousands, and a very long post saying they get so many applications for jobs that it's hard to pick through them and to understand who each of these people are. And I totally get that. I've been there. It's challenging when you have 50 CVs to look through. These people are getting 5, 6, 700 CVs because there's so many people, right? And their advice was you have to hone your narrative for every single role you apply for. I
Yeah,
know people that are applying for 20 roles a day, and those roles are really quite varied because they're, as you just pointed out, they're pretty desperate
yeah,
to find a job, and they're like, "Actually, I could do that, so I'm gonna apply for it."
yeah,
They don't have the time, the brain space to create 20 CVs, cover letters, portfolios for those things. And, this person went on to say, a good example of this was a designer that applied for a role, and they were lesser experienced. They'd only had 3 roles in the past, and you could clearly see that they cared mostly about accessibility. This was their narrative. This was their
yeah,
story. And I'm like, that's really cool. I can tell you the most designers I've had have not had the privilege, I suppose, of getting the types of roles where they can just do one thing. That's really challenging. So even if this is a true story, I'm sure there's elements of, yes, I want to showcase accessibility, but there was a bunch of other stuff I did, and the CV's just been honed towards it. And I read all of this, and I'm coaching a couple of people, one of them being a designer, and she was like, right, I need to do this. I need to think about this. And it got me thinking. I was like, okay, and then will this actually make a huge difference? When you're applying for these roles, are they going to immediately, yours is going to stand up against everybody else's? Everybody else, by the way, being other humans also desperate to find roles. And I think that's a real sad state of affairs, because I don't see, on the flip side of this, I do not see organizations, even when they do say they have strong values in inclusivity, diversity. You tell me now if you've ever been through an interview process where they've asked you the question of how you would like to be interviewed to showcase your abilities and skills in the best light possible.
that's a great question.
And I go back to the design director at Farfetch, because he told me something. He was saying anybody we interview should be perfect for this role, because we've done our due diligence of checking everything before getting to interview stage. Interviews are very expensive for companies, right? You're talking
Yeah,
about 4 or 5 people taking a couple of hours out. That's an expensive
yeah,
thing to do. So when you're interviewing someone, they should already be successful, right? And now this interview is to really unearth how successful they can actually be here, and whether it's a good culture fit. I want to see organizations changing the way that their hiring practices. So if you imagine you're going for your, say, second round interview, you've been through the recruitment interview, everyone's kind of happy. You've got an interview with a head of design, a head of product, and one other person, for example. I want to see the recruiter, the talent person coming to me and going, okay, we have a package of 5 different interview types. Which one do you think is best to showcase your
yeah,
abilities in the best light? Person A might go, do you know what? I want to spend 2 weeks on a task, and I'd love to present it to you. Next person might say, I actually love just getting into a conversation and spending an hour with you, and I can talk to you about everything I've done. The
yeah,
next person might say, whatever it is. So you've got these package, choose your own adventure of hiring practices. And I also want options where, if you think of the single parent who's trying to take their child to school in certain times and is also trying to juggle a job, like, how are we going to support that person? If you think of the person, and I've just said it before, right? Like, my energy is so high in the mornings, like my afternoons are almost useless to me. Like they're so less value. I'm just not energized enough. And I haven't got the focus. So I should be able to say, you know what, I only want a call between like 8 in the morning and 12. That's where I'm going to showcase my best. For a single parent, it might be the only time I can do is 2 o'clock before the school run. That's the time that I'm
Mm.
available. And instead, I don't really see that. I see options of times, but I don't see decisions from organizations to say, we've understood that everybody that's hiring for or wanting to be hired for our roles and going through interviews are different. They have a diverse set of skills, so let's give them options. They have a diverse background, so they can't do an interview on these certain days.
I I've never, both as a hire I've been a hiring manager and I've been hired lots of different times in different organizations. I've never had uh, an exchange of the with the qualities that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Every hiring process that I've either done or have been a part of have always been almost like a mono culture approach, which is
Yeah.
just, it's a 1 hour interview or, 1.5, and we do a task or what have you.
And it's
And
designed for the organization, right? It's designed for you as a hiring manager and you as a hiring company,
mm,
not designed for the candidate to showcase themselves in the best possible light.
that's a great way of putting it. So let me just play that back. So
Yeah.
you're designing for the candidate, not for the organization, a process which helps bring out the best in them.
Yeah.
That's when we talk about inclusivity. Like that's a very good example of inclusive hiring practices.
Yeah.
Is that what you're basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, and I, I'm, I guess, fortunate in that I run my own consultancy now and I do proposals. And that's the way that I find clients and work with clients. I know, even though I've held a number of, I believe, really great positions and have grown my career up through the various levels, I am terrible at interviews. I'm really not great at them, particularly in a remote world. If I can meet someone in person, I'm pretty good.
Can you
In a
tell me about a terrible interview that you've had?
I had one relatively recently, and the only reason I went for it was because it was parental leave cover, and I was like, it's a short stint, so that's good for me as a business. And it was very, very specific to the type of work that I do now. So I went in there honestly full of confidence. I've done this position before multiple times, and the questions were all competency based questions, right?
Mm,
Can you tell me about a time when X, Y, Z? I'm terrible at them because I think there's a couple of reasons. One of them is I have had quite a varied career. So immediately I'm trying to think across 20 years of time and go, which of these things I've done aligns with the question you're asking? I end up mashing them all together. So it ends up being incredibly theoretical and it sounds like it's made up. It just
yeah.
never comes across as
So,
particularly
so in that
authentic.
instance, you're being evaluated about your ability to um, select the best story
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in 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 a sort of 3 or 4 second pause
Yeah.
that perfectly matches what they say. Like,
Yeah.
and when you think about design, like, do you ever need that skill?
Well, this is the point, right? In any of the functions that we in the ones I'm particularly hiring for, but any in product development, I've never been in an organization where someone comes up and goes, Chris, you've got 10 seconds to tell me what you think the answer to this is. Never. I've
Yeah,
never experienced that. And again, going back to inclusive hiring practices, if they really want to stick with those questions, send it to me 2 days before. I will write down all my examples. I can even send them to you, then we can discuss them. We can go through them in as much detail as you want to go through. A bit like in a podcast, right? I've been on a podcast recently where they said we want a very clear example of where you think product ops showed value and impact. I was okay. I got these 5 examples, sent them to them. They picked one, and I said, okay, let's talk about that. We spent
yeah,
an hour digging into it. That's a way better approach for me personally. For other people, they like to think very much on the fly, and they've got very specific examples to give, and that works for them. For me,
yeah.
it really doesn't work.
I mean, I'm quite new to this podcast experience, and that's
Mm,
what I've been learning is that I've had most people would prefer to kind of co-create some themes to talk about. And I've actually just got someone I'm talking to later, and they're like, no, I just want to do it on the cuff. That's, I work better like that, and it's a really good thought because I think I've read a lot of things about people are struggling with the hiring process. It clearly seems broken, but I haven't really heard any like practical examples of how it can be different. So I really, yeah, that's really helpful to hear that. I want to just, whilst we still are talking, and I'm just keeping a little bit of eye on how much time we have left, but I was curious, like you've made a transition several times from sort of design, consultation to product ops. Well, firstly, can you explain product ops to someone that perhaps hasn't got a clue what it is? I'm not saying that's me, but it could be.
It could be anybody, right? I was actually speaking to someone yesterday. I was like, we have to stop saying that product ops is a new thing, because it's been around 2018 was when the concept first started to
Yeah.
grow. So I mean, we're like 7 years into this now, right? But it's still emerging, let's say. Not new, but still emerging. So product operations is
And if I can ask you, can you give, and this is one of those interview things, can you give me a response that I could pass on to my mum?
let's try. Let's try. For
Take
me,
your time.
product operations is about um increasing the quality of decision making in a product team, right? And that can be done in various ways. And the I suppose slightly narrower, boxed in approach, or what most people see product operations um, is focused on internal data. So, like, how are teams operating? What is their strategic focus as a percentage across an organization? What is driving the most value, outcomes, impacts, business value, business impact, customer outcomes, internal data. So how are teams actually operating? A lot of that comes down to lead time metrics, delivery metrics, all these types, how long are things in like QA and things like that. So really focus in on the teams. The second part, or the second pillar, and this is defined in a book called Product Operations by Melissa Perry and Denise Tills. The second pillar is the external data, so the customer data that's coming back in. Are we hitting the right value metrics, outcome metrics, impact metrics? And the third one is a focus on processes and tools. So can we identify bottlenecks, challenges within our process? Now, there's a difference here between product ops, which is a function, a team, a group of people, and product operations, all lowercase. The latter is being done by every product company that's already building things, that's already happening. When the second that someone says, I think we should structure our product management onboarding like this, or I think we need to refine our PRD templates like this, or how do our designers and our product managers and engineers collaborate together? That's all operational work. And it can, the reason that product ops started to grow was um, essentially you want your product teams to be focused on the what. Who are our customers? What do they value? What outcomes can we drive for them? And how do we link that to business impact? Are we making money? Are we reducing costs? Are we finding new customers? I want my teams to be focused on that. So all the operational side of things can be picked up by someone else in collaboration, in partnership. And it's a scaling play, right? So any organization that's around, I don't know, 900 people, either looking to get acquired, looking to IPO, just IPO'd, they want to scale rapidly. So they need repeatability of some of their core practices and processes.
I think I could definitely explain the first part to my mum, which was it helps them make better quality decisions.
Yes.
And that's something that I definitely want to take away with me, because that's something that I try and do as an individual, but I don't have a methodology or a consultancy that explicitly says that that's what I do. But I feel like that's certainly when you get senior and generalists, in a team. That's kind of what we're trying to do, is to try and help that. I'm just curious, like, that side where you're now, like, you're doing these podcasts, and it seems like you're building up your profile and your brand. Like, has there been a point when this started, and going back to, we were talking about that talk earlier where we were just like bricking it, like, did you did you ever have a feeling, because you come across as like very confident and clear, and you've got like quite an articulation of what it is you're saying, and like I sort of think, oh, I can imagine you talking to, sort of senior people in an organization very, very aptly. But I'm just kind of curious, like, has it always been like this, or was there a phase when you started saying I'm a consultant and moving out from just being an in-house designer where you kind of thought, like, you know, am I going to get busted? So did you ever have that kind of sense, or have you always been like very like, no, I'm happy and confident in this space?
I think it's peaks and troughs. I know when I joined ThoughtWorks, the things that you're describing were probably supercharged, let's say, because you're in a position as a consultant where you have to be able to influence senior leadership, and you're in those positions to do that. I remember one of my first engagements. I was out in Dublin, so I was flying to Dublin like every Monday, back every Thursday evening. So it was
Wow.
really quite intense as a project, and I was super nervous going into that room, that office
Wait.
for the first time because I was not because I wasn't. I knew my. I suppose I knew my capabilities as uh, an emerging leader in that consultancy was strong. I don't think my tech and design skills were particularly strong anymore. But I was going in, I was like, what is a consultant? What do they expect of me? Like, am I capable of being a consultant? Because that to me was a big word. It was a big term. And I always looked at as consultants as the forerunners, the people that really know what they're talking
They've
about and
always
are
got the
specialists.
answers.
Yeah, it's almost like they have the answers. And now, obviously, as a consultant, and after a couple of years, you realize you don't actually need any answers. You just
Hey,
need to be
just
able to,
very good questions.
yeah, very good questions and enable other people. And actually, I was very thankful because I did get into that mode very quickly on this first client. But one of the first things that happened was we were talking about a particular new set of features, I think. And I think I said something like, and I come from a user experience and design background, and I said, what we need to do is just make the users do X. And I was like, it's something I said. And one of the ThoughtWorks consultants turned around in the group in front of the client team and leaders and went,
Yeah.
that's not a very ThoughtWorks thing to say, I don't think. And I was like, wow, okay, damn. I don't care about that too much anymore. But I spoke to him afterwards about that, and I was like, okay, so can we dig into that? It's like, someone just said that to me when I joined ThoughtWorks, so I thought, it'd be worthwhile saying to you as well. And I was like, wow, okay.
In front of the
But
client.
in front of the client, and that was actually the ethos of ThoughtWorks was incredible because we were such a strong unit as a consulting group that saying things like that in front of the client was 100% normal.
Hmm.
And to be honest, he was almost testing how quickly I would get on board with saying things that were very difficult to say in front of clients.
Did you feel like betrayed in that moment, or like awkward, or how did
I
you feel?
didn't feel betrayed. I was very confused. I think it was mainly because I was going in there questioning if I was capable of being a consultant, and there was someone immediately asking,
Yeah.
questions about that capability.
Yeah.
It's interesting because one of our main clients on that project, I was chatting to him like months later, and he said he's never come across a group of consultants that can debate. I think he used the word argue, but it's really debate so strongly on a direction to go, but still commit to one direction anyway, and then still go to the pub after and be best friends again. Like
Yeah.
that was like eye opening to him, and that was the ethos of that consultancy,
Isn't isn't
including
isn't
a sorry, go on.
doesn't that happen because of psychological safety? Like there has been a degree that of an unsigned contract that you've all made that you could challenge each other, and you're not challenging Chris as a
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
you're just challenging his ideas. But to create that safety, like were there things that either you saw ThoughtWorks do or something that you're mindful of in the consultancy you do now that creates those safe environments?
Yeah, I think there's multiple things. It does go back to inclusivity.
Yeah.
Everyone knew and everyone had been hired with that type of value. And honestly, when I was hired, that value probably wasn't as high up my agenda as it is certainly today. And I think ThoughtWorks taught me a lot about that. But that was a value that was hired for. So you knew that, again, you can bring your whole self to work without fear of reprisal. So you can say things quite openly. But we had the backing of leadership, right? And I just want to give you a quick example of what that honestly really looks like. Um, there has definitely been times where I've been in a room with a mixed group of ThoughtWorks consultants, client team, and senior person in the room as well, where, and I think we've all come across this, and honestly, we see it way more in remote meetings, where a woman may be speaking and a man's voice becomes the loudest in the room and becomes the voice where everyone turns around and listens to. Now, in most organizations, what would happen is usually nothing. Honestly, nothing would happen. Or maybe if we're lucky, outside of that meeting, someone might say to that leader, look, I feel like your approach might not quite be the best for the team. Because it is usually someone that's in a management position, and usually a man. The ThoughtWorks approach to this is immediately someone in the room will say, "Whoa, sorry, hang on, wait a minute. I believe this person was speaking. Let's allow them to finish." Now, you can only do that if you know, coming out of that room, when that senior leader goes to your consulting director and says, I'm not happy about the way I was spoken to in there. And that consulting director says, okay, tell me about the story. They need to 100% back that
Back
approach.
that up. Yeah.
And they did. We always had that air cover. We always knew if we took the consulting director into a room and said, this has happened, they would go and speak to that person immediately and say, look, this is not the way we do things here.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think with that support of leadership, and that's when an organization really believes in its values,
mm.
because they're willing to lose a client. And they have those stories of ThoughtWorks slightly before my time, where they lost clients. They pulled out of clients because the relationship wasn't going to work because the cultures didn't align.
Is that, and just as that's such a really good story. I like that. And it immediately makes me reflect and think, God, have I ever been that voice? I'm just like,
Mhm.
God,
Yeah.
it's quite a humbling
It's
description.
very hard to do. Like, it's a very and again, because unfortunately for both me and you, the majority of the time people are doing this, they look like us. It's
Yeah.
very hard to call out and say, "Wait a minute, that's not right."
Yeah.
And again, a lot of the time you'll see if these stories come up, it might be another woman or another unrepresented person in the room saying, "Wait a
Well,
minute, don't you think we should change?" And it's not. It's on us to kind of do that. The people that look like them.
yeah. You know what? Like, I feel this is an important conversation that people that look like you and me should be having publicly.
Yep.
And I feel like it's a good reminder for me because I want to be on the right side of this debate,
Yeah.
and I don't want to be making this a worse situation for anyone that I work with. And
But
it's
that's the
something
action that I was talking about earlier, right? You can't sit back and say, "I have this value," and quietly talk to colleagues and friends about it. You have to make action. You have to make things happen if things are gonna, like, progress in any direction.
amazing, Chris. I think that's a really good point for us to leave on because I feel like it's quite a sombering point,
Mhm.
and I just sort of feel like yeah, I need to reflect on that myself and thanks for bringing that point in and the whole of your conversation has been really, really interesting to hear about, like, dig into inclusivity particularly. I found that really helpful,
Good.
and hopefully other people will too. So,
Hopefully.
yeah, thank you, Chris.
No
This has been
problem.
great, and I hope it was nice to reunite with you briefly after 10 years.
Yeah,
And yeah, perhaps we'll have another conversation another time.
no problem, and yeah, thanks for all your listeners. Thanks for inviting me. Like, I know we did this quite quickly, but I've really enjoyed it, so thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Cool.